I think I'm going to get started. So, welcome everyone. Thanks for being here. I hope you had a good lunch. Wouldn't you know it, I'm getting a phone call right as I start. I should turn that off. So, this session is International NGOs leveraging Drupal for social change. And what I want to do is start a conversation about how these organizations are leveraging Drupal. By a show of hands, how many people in the room actually work for a nonprofit or volunteer with the nonprofit? Okay, wow, that's pretty much everyone in the room. And how many people build websites for these organizations? All right, so we're in good company. I mean, this is the pretty much everyone here. A little bit about this presentation. It's a little bit more strategic. So I'm going to be talking about the impacts of Drupal, how it's showing up in the real world, rather than the nuts and bolts of views and panels and how the specific modules. I do have some of that information. If we want to talk about that after the session or perhaps in the Q&A, we can do that. A lot of the people that built the technologies that I'm going to show here are actually in the room as well. And so I'm hoping that they're going to be able to help answer some of the questions and share a little bit more background. The real key is how we can leverage Drupal. That's the point of the presentation. And I really want to say I'm honored to be the one speaking up here. I really believe that everyone in this room could probably be giving this presentation. I'm speaking on behalf of hundreds, probably thousands of people. And really, absolutely honored. So a little bit about me. My name is Aaron Pava. I'm one of the co-founders of Civic Actions. Civic Actions has been in the intersection of Drupal and nonprofits for about 7 years. I'm based out of Oakland, California. I'm a new dad of a daughter of 16 months. This is my 7th DrupalCon, so I've been participating in DrupalCon since OzCon in Amsterdam in 2005. But most important than anything, I really have a really deep commitment to empowering people and organizations. And that's really how I found Drupal. I found it was the best tool for the job. I came in through the nonprofit route. I'm also on Twitter, and that's how you could follow my organization or me. So here's the agenda. What I want to do is share a little bit about the history of Drupal and social change. Then the bulk of the presentation is really going to be exploring some real-world examples of how Drupal is being implemented. And then, like I said, we'll open up the conversation, have some Q&A, perhaps some resource sharing, so we can learn from each other. As some of you know, Drupal has a very long history of social change. And I want to set some of that background because I think it's important to give some context in how we got here as Drupal as an advocacy tool. A little bit of my own personal history. Like I said, I came from the community activist and advocacy background. I was working on voter registration, GeoTV projects, and was doing that in 2000, 2003, in that time period. I first learned about Drupal in 2004 through the Dean Space campaign. How many people remember Dean Space or Civic Space? Okay, so a few hands. There was a project, so this is back in 2003, Drupal was pretty new on the scene. Open source CMSs were pretty new on the scene. And it was in the political environment. I was working on the Dennis Kucinich presidential campaign. There was the Howard Dean campaign was really emerging. And a couple really brilliant students, Zach Rosen, Neil Drum, who are at Chapter 3 now, created a Drupal distribution, essentially, that took Drupal, really formed it for political campaigns, integrated it with a CRM called CiviCRM, added a lot of functionality that was really specific towards doing online advocacy in that space. It was essentially a distribution before distribution. It ended up being a hosted environment before the Acquia type of hosted environment. And it was a fork of Drupal at a certain point, and then re-merged back into Drupal 5. So there was, during that period, it really brought in a lot of progressive-oriented folks that were in the Howard Dean space, in the political space. It's where I got introduced to it. I was running some political campaigns at the time, and really saw the power of an open source CMS and how it could really be used and leveraged to make real sustainable impact. Now, when we talk about nonprofit advocacy, a lot of people have different views about what advocacy is, whether you're talking about advocacy at the DC level or wherever your state government, if you're talking about bringing your communities together, citizen engagement, that type of thing. And then people have a lot of preconceptions about nonprofits. I mean, I think a lot of people in this room actually know a whole lot about these preconceptions, and then also where they don't actually match reality all the time. I mean, traditionally, nonprofits are seen, or it's seen by the outside world as slow and bureaucratic, and generally the people are passionate about their mission. Maybe inside organizations, they don't know a lot about technology, or they're more likely than not under-resourced. So they rely on a lot of volunteer support. There's not necessarily a lot of long-term thinking. They don't have the luxury of doing a lot of strategic planning that the enterprise often has. And sometimes there's a disconnect between the boards and the stakeholders and the implementers. I know a lot of this stuff is not true. You probably know a lot of this stuff is not true as well. And there's different scales of nonprofits. And the larger nonprofits, this actually doesn't necessarily match up as well. However, there are places where it is true, and one of the places where a lot of organizations struggle really is around having really stellar technology support. And yet, there's never been a time like this. There's never been a time where the problems that nonprofits are trying to address have been bigger. I mean, if you're working on poverty or natural disasters, climate change, population issues, human rights, I mean, I could keep going on about energy and conflicts in the Horn of Africa and globalization and world hunger and sex trafficking and animal welfare and extinction and education. I have more that I could say here. The problem hasn't been more urgent that we support these types of organizations in really helping in their mission. Nonprofits, however, for the first time in history, have the same tools available to them as the enterprise. And we're really seeing that. I mean, here at DrupalCon, we have the exact technology that we're using at Sony Music or any of these big corporations. We could apply the same technology to the social sector. The bottom line is this: never before have we ever had a chance to leverage so much social change. I really believe that Drupal holds the key to a sustainable future. There's so much work to be done. There's so much work that we can learn from each other around the work that we're already doing, around recipes, case studies, sharing modules, and best practices. So the way I see it is, you guys are really the heroes. We need to be sharing this information with each other. I want to start getting that conversation going now. So what I'm going to demonstrate is about 8 different case studies of real-world impact using Drupal. Again, it's not a technical conversation, but specific ways that we're making change. I really hope that this is, this conversation is a seed that inspires new people to enter the conversation, and then also for us that have been working in the space for a long time to really facilitate connections and sharing ways that we're making real impact together. So this is a picture from January 12th, 2010. It was when there was a 7.0 catastrophic earthquake that hit Haiti. There was 52 aftershocks to the Haiti earthquake. And that 3 million people were affected by this quake. 316,000 people died. That's 105 9/11s. 300,000 people were injured. 1 million people were made homeless. The Haiti government says that 500,000 residences and 300,000 commercial buildings were collapsed or damaged in the aftermath of the earthquake. Mercy Corps is an organization that supports devastation that happens like this. They're one of the largest humanitarian agencies in the world. They provide disaster relief and assistance to more than 16.5 million people in 40 countries. Big nonprofit. I mean, almost 4,000 employees around the globe. They're headquartered in Portland. Annual revenue of this organization is in the hundreds of millions of dollars a year. During this time of the Haiti earthquake, the big news and what was happening in the media, and it was amazing, was people were really using innovative ways of using SMS messaging to donate to the Red Cross and other organizations to raise money for the victims of the quake. There was also a quiet revolution going on in other ways that people were raising money for victims like this. One of the things that Mercy Corps did, which is a site built on Drupal with an in-house team based in Portland, Oregon, was, and actually the Portland Drupal community supported Mercy Corps as well. They had personal fundraising pages were created. And they had over 2,000 of these sign-up pages within a week of the earthquake. Here's an example of what the splash page of the fundraising pages. And as you could see, you could sign up as an individual or as a civic group or as a business, and then you can then go out to your community, raise money, pool that money. There's a sort of gamification of how much money you can raise for your community. So rather than donating $10 by phone, these folks are raising $27,000 sometimes or higher, based on their group. Actually, some of them are a lot higher than that. Here's an example of what one of those fundraising pages looks like. And you could see on the side some examples of other people that were raising funds as well. You could put a personal message in here. It really has people own making a difference themselves. So the results of this, in 1 week, $500,000 was raised through these personal fundraising pages for the victims. These were all nodes that donors sent to their friends. All in all, Mercy Corps raised $4 million US dollars for Haiti relief. So really successful campaign, something that I think could be leveraged for a lot of different organizations. 350.org, probably one of my favorite new global nonprofits. They're a global grassroots advocacy campaign that helps, they want to advocate the cut of carbon in the atmosphere and stop catastrophic climate change. It was founded by Bill McKibben, and the name represents the highest amount of carbon parts per million that we could have in the atmosphere to sustain life. It's 350 parts per million. There's a quote by James Hansen. I think I'll let it speak for itself. Getting the number 350 in the human awareness planet-wide is a big task. One of the ways that 350.org approached this problem is they wanted to coordinate global days of action for grassroots citizens to stage these local events, highlighting the number 350 in group photos, videos, in-person events. And they did these massive days of action, Drupal-based website, having a chance for people to post their events, invite their friends to attend these events, share their videos, share their experiences online. Here's an example of what the 350.org website looks like. In 2009, this site was, or this particular module and set of functionality for the distributed events was created by WareCorp, who I know are here. And the result of this campaign to RSVP to an event, share your events on Twitter, Facebook, and then for the staff to have back-end reports on region by country, other criteria. 2 times in a row, the largest coordinated grassroots actions that have ever taken place. Massive, massive change using Drupal. Here's an example of what what one of the event pages would look like. And to give you a sense of what the 350 impact really demonstrated, I have a short video here.
tarihine denk getirilen
Vanmiddag op het Schouwburgplein het getal 350 uitgebeeld.
По закінченні прихожани церкви активісти
188 ülkede 7000'den fazla noktada buluştular.
One planet, one voice.
Numero 350.
Totally awesome work. Out of the real results that were created from this day of action, besides the massive awareness, 100,000 trees were planted. Excuse me. More than 100 miles of coastline were cleaned up. All in all, there was 7,000 events in 188 countries. Really impressive. Open source, Drupal, modules available to all of us. The next case study I want to share about is Amnesty International. So Civic Actions has been working with Amnesty International for about, since 2007. We switched them over from the CMS that they had to a Drupal-based CMS, integrated it with Civi CRM, and started on Drupal 5. We not too recently migrated them to Drupal 6 and Civi 3.2. They're doing tons of stuff with Drupal, and probably I don't have enough time to really get into all of it. It's one of the sites I probably know the best out of all of these. Drupal, Civi CRM, Alfresco document management, and also doing mobile going back to 2008. One of the big splashes around the Amnesty site in 2007 was it was one of the first Drupal sites to really deploy I-18N or internationalization at scale. 4 different languages, English, Spanish, French, and Arabic. So the whole page will flip. All the nodes will change language. So you could reach all those different audiences. The Drupal site is integrated with an Alfresco document server, which has 50,000 documents for reporters and other folks. You know, it uses a Google search appliance, actually, is also integrated in this. Civi CRM, it's an open source CRM if you're not familiar with it. They use it. All their membership is inside Civi CRM. They do all their mailing through Civi. They use Civi Contribute to do donation pages, activism module. I think there's 127,000 records when we first started in this. And then the annual report, we made it, instead of doing their printed annual report, they now do a PDF, but they have a mobile-friendly website, essentially. So this work was not only getting them up into Drupal, but training their internal staff so that they could take it over and totally be empowered to use Drupal themselves. Here's an example of what the Arabic version of the same homepage looks like. We refactored Civi CRM a bit, so and it's a lot easier to do this now. Civi CRM's new APIs are off the hook, so you could do this way easier than the way that we did it. But if you're registering for a new account based on the pull down of your country, then it would like forward you to the right. Make sure you're registered for the right country. This was for the Secretariat, which is kind of the overall arching Amnesty International. Here's an example of what the Alfresco document server looks like when you search for something. Actually, this is a little bit better of what the search is, and it looks there's a lot to search on here. But for example, if you're looking, this screenshot is if I want to look at documents that are U.S. based about the death penalty, that are written in English, and that have certain, that have audio or video or have events related to it or whatever, then it would display all those results. In this case, it was 622 documents served up. So really powerful. All that stuff is contributed back. Happy to share a lot more about that if you're interested after the session. So the next case study I want to talk about is Human Rights Watch. So Human Rights Watch, they're one of the leading independent organizations about defending and protecting human rights. They do a lot of great stuff around challenging governments and holding them to account around abusive practices around human rights law. They enlist the international community to really support human rights for everyone. This site, it was built by Enrique Parasis, I want to say, and he's in the Drupal community, pretty active actually. I don't know, are you here, Enrique? No, all right. So they really took internationalization. This is a more recent site. They took internationalization to the next level. So here's an example of what the homepage of Human Rights Watch looks like. Zoomed up, you could see that there's 9 languages here that Human Rights Watch displays. And I have some screenshots: Spanish, Russian, these are from yesterday, Japanese, Hebrew, German, French, Chinese, Arabic. So again, tons of internationalization. Internationalization's even been expanded way beyond that now. So it's available for all of us. It's something we need to be thinking about as we're thinking about international NGOs, thinking way beyond just English. The next case study I want to present is Oxfam International. So Oxfam is a coalition, actually. A lot of people don't know this. It's 15 organizations really under one umbrella, 98 countries. They fight poverty and injustice. there was recently Chapter 3 built a global intranet for them that has 6,000 users from across the world, and it's really a place for Oxfam to connect all the people that are in the field offices in all these 98 countries, have them find each other. There's actually a great long-form case study on the last DrupalCon where Matt Cheney goes in deep about this one, and if you're interested, I highly recommend it. What was really key about this particular project was it was a place that was a fit-in-the-middle solution. Drupal was the one place where all the different component elements of the organization plug in together, reduced a lot of costs, consolidated a lot of pieces of technology, also had some document management, LDAP server, single sign-on, etc. They had in-place editors for content, and users have their own dashboard depending on what specific thing that they're monitoring. So here's an example of what the dashboard looks like for their intranet. You could customize your own dashboard, which is, I think, one of the coolest parts. Find the individual groups of the people that you want to connect with, share documents, really powerful document search library. They use Apache Solr for search, and real-time chat in this on their intranet. Also, one of the really cool aspects of this is there's a lot of things around related content. So if you're looking for a particular issue around poverty in Somalia, for example, you can find the other people in the organization that might be working on that. Big aspects of discoverability, learning center. This was, there's a lot I could say about this. I mean, I'm so impressed with this site, actually. Here's some profile pages of individuals. Really heavy site, so they use a lot of like caching, varnish, and stuff. I'm not going to get too deep into the technical aspects, however. And then, of course, groups and file repository, and like I said, the Solr search. So again, all Drupal, all open, all available to all our organizations. Greenpeace International has been slow to adopt Drupal, but there's been one Greenpeace area. The Greenpeace UK has really adopted it and taken it on. So I want to show what Greenpeace UK has done. They're really leading. I think Greenpeace is going to move in this direction. You guys probably don't need too much introduction to them, but they're headquartered in Amsterdam, 2.8 million supporters worldwide, and they're in 41 countries. The sites that I'm going to show you here for Greenpeace UK were built by Torchbox, which is a Drupal development shop in England. So the big breakthrough that they developed was something called local groups, where they call it the Get Active area. And it's where active supporters are part of a local network which has dedicated coordinators and key activists that have taken on this specific responsibility and then coordinate an offline group. So the Greenpeace headquarters delegates projects down to these local coordinators, and then they synchronize the activities across the country. So as a Greenpeace supporter, I could go into the Greenpeace UK, type in I don't think they call it a zip code, but the equivalent of a zip code, and I could see the groups that are near me, join a group, and when I join a group, I'm taken to a group page And from here, a group administrator can really dictate what's on this page. This was designed by, it uses organic groups at its core, but they really they stripped away a lot of the interface of organic groups, and they have this header piece, members that are part of the group, the current campaign that's dictated by the administrator of the group, and then upcoming events and such. So this is really like an activity hub of my local community, you know. So there might be this community in West London meets at a pub, you know, every week or something, and this is their homepage. So Greenpeace is really interesting in that they do pretty splashy media events oftentimes to demonstrate what's happening out there. I want to share a success story of one of these media events that they did. And I have a short video here to set some context. So the backdrop of this is that Mattel, which is one of the biggest toy manufacturers in the world, is using packaging from Asia pulp and paper. And Asia pulp and paper has a pretty bad track record of pulping Indonesian rainforests, actually causing threats to tigers with extinction. They've been caught multiple times and fined. This is Greenpeace's way of really putting pressure on Mattel and really the supply chain to stop using paper from Asian pulp and paper, Asia pulp and paper. So on June 7th, they did this campaign. They then did it's a Drupal site, went to those groups that I just showed you. It became the main campaign. They asked people to go on Facebook, onto Barbie's Facebook page, and sharing the story of the rainforest destruction. By June 10th, 3 days later, Barbie's Facebook page became so overwhelmed with comments that Mattel actually had to turn off their Facebook and close the page. The good news is that by October, Mattel was getting relentlessly inundated by the Greenpeace activists, and finally decided that it wasn't worth it. Another toy manufacturer actually thought that they were next and came forward and said that they were going to stop using Asia pulp and paper, and then it really forced Mattel to do the same thing. And so a 3-month campaign changed their practices, and here's Ken's tweet of the big news. All right, so International Rescue Committee, they respond to humanitarian crisis and help rebuild lives. It was really founded by the behest of Albert Einstein, and they work in 40 countries, 22 U.S. cities, really amazing organization, rescue.org. They have a website that was built by Jackson River, great organization that's also here at DrupalCon. And Jackson River built a website for them called Rescue Gifts. So the problem with raising funds was that they were raising funds in Get Active, which is a SaaS offering, but there was a lot of limitations to the SaaS offering. And they had a first version of this gift site and trying to raise funds for their organization in 2008. They do two major pushes for fundraising. One happens at the end of the year around Thanksgiving. The other one's during Mother's Day. And they don't actually sell products or get straight donations. What they do is they have these symbolic gifts. So you could buy a year of school for a young girl, or you could buy health worker training. You're not actually buying the year of school, but you're buying the equivalent of a year of school for the organization and the kind of work that they do. So they set up this specific website. It's called gifts.rescue.org, and moved it from this hosted Get Active solution to a pure Drupal solution. It uses Uber cart essentially. And here you could see you could add a gift to your cart. You could search by gift price, for Mother's Day or what have you. And then at the end, it goes through like a process where you get to choose a physical card or a PDF, but they have a fulfillment process where it mails out a physical card. And really successful implementation. How we know it was successful is that from 2009 to 2010, it doubled the number of donations. The following year, in the upgrade of the site, they did threefold the number of donations from moving off the SaaS solution. So another great example of implementing Drupal, getting it away from the proprietary solutions here. All right, I think this is my last case study before we open it up to a conversation. And this one's ActionAid, pretty short description or demonstration here. So they really empower people to fight for the rights that they're denied. They really empower people on their own land, around their resources, and helping them find their own solutions. The big win or the technology that was implemented here was a technology did multi-site per country on a single Drupal instance. So, like I said, they're in 40 countries now. So it's organic groups based, but the organic groups is based on the subdomain, and it allows for different domains for different groups. So it's IP based. When you come, it kind of figures it out and puts you in the right organic group. And then what's really cool is there's this group-to-group sharing. So like a group administrator, say you're in one of the countries, US, and you want to share some content in your organic group, what it does is it automatically creates 20 containers, kind of holder text in the other groups, for the other groups to translate that content and puts it into a moderation queue. And so it uses OG as this engine for sharing between countries, essentially, across languages. Pretty innovative. It's kind of hard to demonstrate it in a slide, but here's a picture of the ActionAid website. So, like I said, the results, internationalization of content in organic groups, IP-based, and making it really easy for editors to share content between different countries and manage their sites from content written around the world. So the bottom line with all of this is there's really a lot of work to do. I mean, there's so many great examples. I put together a lot more case studies than that I've demonstrated here. And one of the things that I found through this process is it took me a lot of work to find out what was happening. And that's, I think, one of the places where we could really step up our engagement with each other. all of us are working on these Drupal projects. All of us are doing really cool, innovative stuff. I'm really confident that every one of us could be up here demonstrating work that we've done and showing other examples that we don't know about. The call to action is really, how do we share this information with each other? How can we make it easy to share recipes around what modules we're using, how we're doing it, how we could replicate our success with each other. And so you can use 350's events stuff, or the rescue stuff, or you could use Jackson River Springboard stuff that I didn't even get to it, but like ACLU is using, and the ACLU, we don't know about this stuff with each other. So I want to put it out there. I want to talk with folks, see if there's a way that we can better share information and how we can work together. And with that, I want to open it up to some Q&A. So we have about 20 minutes or so. And I think if you have a case study that you know about that you want to share, if you have questions about the technology, I think a lot of the organizations that I spoke about, Jackson River, Ware Corp, Chapter 3, Torchbox, DataScribe, Civic Actions, Mercy Corps, they're all, a lot of them are here, so they could probably answer a lot of the questions as well. And let's get this conversation going. So there's a microphone in the center of the room, and we could start there.
Hi, my name's Kevin. I work at Kiva. Going off of what you just said, we have been trying to collaborate with people, and I'm wondering, what do you think the best platform is for trying to collaborate? And on that note, I think there's sort of two things. One is sort of showing off and sharing work on a more business type level, and then the also is like actually getting down to nitty gritty and sharing code. And is the best platform trying to get that back on Drupal.org, or is it doing, what we've been doing is putting stuff up on GitHub, or is there another place that we should be trying to put together to share this kind of code between us? Especially because I really like the Mercy Corps fundraising page, and I'd really like to see the code for that.
Yeah.
And I'd really like to share what we have as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the question. I mean, so there was a great bird of a feather session yesterday that was exactly, this is kind of what it came into. There's all these examples. How do we best share it? Personally, I think one of the challenges of sharing, this from my own personal experience, one of the challenges of sharing is once you've worked on a website for 6 months or a year, or you get to the end of a project, the last thing you want to do is write a case study and write everything that you did and get to, you're ready for the next thing, and we don't take the time. So whatever we can do to really shorten the sharing of it, maybe when the site's not even complete, but we've completed, I use these 4 modules, and it does this discrete bit of functionality, and there's some type of repository for it or something. The bird of the feather session, some people volunteered to make a website to do that. I think that will be great. I think in the short term, Drupal for Good on D.O, groups.drupal.org is probably the way to go. And I think we just need to make it we need to embody that it is essential. That it's not a voluntary thing or an optional thing. So other ideas that people came up with that I think are really good is either putting a link inside on your website somewhere that just says if you want the code, and you could link, at least find out who the developer are. I mean, half this project was finding out who developed these sites. I mean, it was hard to find out. The most minimum thing that we can do is put something in your source code, so when you view source, you can see who built the site and where to go get more information. And that's what we're doing, starting tomorrow or starting today. I mean, it's that, I think that's the easiest, simplest thing we can do. So.
Thank you.
Oh, great. Okay, awesome. So the domain's already going to happen. And it was Drupal for nonprofits.com or? Okay. And then wasn't there, out of the BOF, there was a shared document that was going to be created with people that wanted to be part of this conversation? Does anyone remember the bit.ly URL? Okay. MPO, okay, 2012 NPO BOF. N, Nancy, Paul, Oregon, BOF.
Is it NPO or just NP?
It's one or the other. We'll figure it out. Maybe someone could Google, look it up right now. MPO. Okay, that's what it is. MPO BOF. Okay, yes.
All right, thank you. That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
I guess what I'm gathering is you put together your case studies, they weren't posted on Drupal.org, all of these, or you had to do research?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would have been so much easier if there were.
I know. Well,
and so I'll make this accessible too and share it. But I hope next time that there's just hundreds that we could pull from and do this. Yeah.
all right. So you may not know the answer to this question, but the Oxfam site that you showed, do you know if that was Drupal Commons or organic groups?
It was. I think initially that they were actually going to do it on. Not Commons, but what was the Open Atrium? I mean, it was before Commons, and then I think they bumped up against where Commons or Atrium wouldn't work, and so they ended up just doing it custom. Using Drupal 6 and writing their own modules for it.
Okay,
configuration. It was done by Chapter 3, and they actually, like I said, there's a video about how they did it from the last DrupalCon, and it's great.
Cool. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, totally.
Hi, two quick things. First, I was wondering if you knew the name of the module that I think it was the 350 group did at the very beginning, the events module that you mentioned?
Yeah, it was, I think it's called D-Events. It was done by WareCorp, right over here. And you want to talk about it, you guys? And didn't Vlad, or you guys, so, yeah, why don't you come up here?
So this is actually a set of modules which include built upon views and CCK for Drupal 6, and mapping functionality was done using Hive Maps library. It's open source as well, as far as I know.
Great, thank you so much. And the other quick thing I had I just wanted to comment. I was kind of surprised to see Amnesty International out there because I work there. And I just wanted to comment that I work for the U.S. section, which is slightly different than the one that you...
Yeah, this is the International Secretariat.
Yeah, the IS. So the U.S. section also, about a year ago, we recently migrated over from a kind of really rough in-house CMS to a Drupal 6 install. And we worked with Jackson River on that with a very successful migration. Everything was really great. So I just also wanted to throw that out there.
That's awesome. Jackson River rocks.
Hi. Oh.
Yeah, there's one more comment, I think, about the last question.
Yeah, I'm Leif Utney with WareCorp. I work with Vitali. I just wanted to mention that the work that we did for 350, putting together that event module, is pretty heavily customized, and we would love to abstract that and release it to the wild so that other people can use it, but there's a chunk of work that has to happen. So if you're interested in working with us on that, let me know.
Working in organizations and consulting, I find that most of nonprofits it's pretty easy to sell them on Drupal, but I keep waiting to have that person or that organization that just doesn't get it. And I was wondering if in your research you'd come across any consistent concerns or whatever that organizations had about switching to Drupal and what they might be.
I mean, I think Dries nailed it yesterday when he said the authoring interface. Yeah. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, if Drupal had the authoring interface that was as simple as WordPress, it would just, all these administrators would adopt it. but it's a little clunky if you're not familiar with it. It's actually a great interface for site builders, you know, but when you're an administrator of a site, it's a little scary, and I think that's one of the things that puts people off. A lot of the old concerns around security of open source and, you know, the scale of the community have kind of been resolved. The other big challenge that if people have done the deep dive into it will bring up is, yes, it's portable. Yes, I don't have vendor lock-in. Yes, it's free, but I can't find good Drupal support. You know, there's not enough good people out there that are willing to work on the site for us, or at least on nonprofit rates. I mean, we're lucky at Civic Actions to have the luxury of working on larger scale nonprofit sites that do have, you know, pretty big budgets, you know, or that could dedicate resources. And it's a valid concern. And it's part of the call to action here too, which is we really need to bring more people in the community that want to be working on these types of world-changing projects quickly. And if we do have that community built, I think that the nonprofit community will adopt Drupal really quickly.
Yeah. Our foundation doesn't accept donations online, but we're primarily engaged in raising awareness for international issues, and we're not advocates, and we are trying very hard not to be, you know, in the advocacy game. So I guess my real issue with using Drupal as a nonprofit is, what are the key ingredients that you would recommend we adopt, you know, say whatever emerging technology there is, modules or whatever, to build a successful community of experts, people that can help us start that dialogue?
It's a good question. I find it hard often to say this is the right technology solution with just a little bit of information. I think you really need to get a little bit deeper dive and understand your community. One of the things, obviously, is not everyone wants to go to a website to share information, right? So sometimes communities, and we're finding this, we branch out a little bit beyond Drupal because we do other emerging technologies. Sometimes it's better to do technology that facilitates face-to-face stuff. Sometimes people are more comfortable having working groups using conference calls that are scheduled by websites. There's a lot of cool stuff that's happening in the audio space. I mean, I really think that's the frontier of technology. I could say a whole lot more about that, but you know, I'm happy to talk with you offline. I mean, and the short answer is, I mean, there's a lot of good internet stuff. Drupal Commons is a good, you know, way to get started right away. Drupal organic groups obviously is awesome and really scalable to do lots of different things. I don't know, anyone else have any thoughts around quick wins around her particular requirements? Yeah, so let's talk more about it after the session and we can see about your community.
So I wanted to ask about sort of advocacy modules writ large, because I think nonprofits using Drupal benefit from a lot of the work that shops working for for-profit companies do.
Yeah.
But advocacy modules are sort of specific to, you know, nonprofit and social change sites.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first started using Drupal in like 2005, there was still a lot of advocacy-oriented stuff that had come out of Dean Space and Civic Space.
Yeah.
I think there was like a letter to the editor module,
Totally.
and there was like a petition module, and there were like a few other ones. And since then, it feels like there hasn't been a lot of support or development there. Like there have been some things developed, but then they got abandoned, or there have been things developed, but they didn't get contributed back. And so like a lot of the nonprofits that I've worked with that are on Drupal are using Salsa or Convio or some other like third-party system.
Yep.
So I was just wondering what your thoughts were on sort of the state of all that.
from one perspective, like back in 2004, 2005, in the civic space Drupal 5 days, when there was a lot of custom module development, it seemed that people were writing lots of custom modules that did specific things. When the whole move to CCK views and kind of compiling sites and not doing custom module development, which was an awesome innovation for the Drupal community, what I found was there was more of that piecemealing together solutions and less of specific modules to do functionality around advocacy. There's also, on the other side of it, you would see groups like Trellin, which also does some good nonprofit work. I didn't demonstrate any of their stuff here, but great people. And they, they used to maintain something called the Event Finder, and it was a pretty hairy, awesome module doing somewhat similar stuff to this. And then when the architecture of Drupal changed, they couldn't really support that module any longer. So this is really where I think that the call for us to share how we're doing things, because a lot of these solutions, like what 350 is and WareCorp is sharing, it was really a combination of 4 different modules, a recipe to put it together, some strategic stuff around it. We need to understand what that is, because it's not just a one-click install, download, and have it. And I think the more sharing of how we're building sites is what we need. Yeah, great, thank you. I think we have like a couple minutes, 2 minutes, and then we're done.
Hi, Aaron.
Hi, Leo.
I'm curious about the use of mobile phones.
Can you speak a little louder?
I wonder if you could tell us a little more about the use of mobile phones in the nonprofit, whether you've seen whether or not that's spreading, the way we hear, in other fields.
I mean, I think we all know like the major trends that are happening in mobile, right? And I missed the keynote this morning, but I know essentially what it's about. It's like we got to think about mobile first, and I think as nonprofits we need to think about that. We have, first and foremost, we need to be thinking about responsive design, clearly. For most nonprofits, they don't need apps, but for a lot of the things that we're demonstrating here, we might be able to extrapolate and think about in a mobile perspective. So if I join a Greenpeace group, what's the group near me? Where are other members? How can I get connected with folks? And then obviously, here's my hunch, and I know some people are working on this. A lot of them, there's a big wave of technology that's coming out of the Occupy movement. And the Occupy movement is, I think there's going to be a spring of Occupy, like after this hibernation period. And there's going to be a lot of cool technology. And I think like SMS, VoIP Drupal, thinking about, most teenagers don't use email. They're using SMS and Facebook and that type of stuff. And they interact differently. And we're going to think about how do we, it's not even mobile first, but almost like mobile only is the way we need to start thinking about this stuff, repurposing this stuff. I think that's probably what we're going to be talking about next year. All the case studies are going to be what are the innovative ways that we're using mobile in order to bring communities together. So great question. I hope we all start sharing that. I don't know the answer yet. Yeah, I think this is the last question.
This is actually kind of just a comment.
Yeah, I'll make the, I'm sorry, just 1 second. There was a quick thing. So I'm going to make my slide. You could always get me, and then there's a session page, and I'm going to upload my slides after the session so you could get all my slides, okay? So go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Thank you for uploading those. This is kind of just a comment. I work for a fairly small web design company in a very small town in Indiana. And we tend to focus a lot of our development on nonprofits that are locally based, and to try to kind of help offset some of the cost when they come in and they want this really special feature that may require either a lot of very specific development if the feature doesn't really previously exist, or if we haven't worked with it, is we'll build community sites that we kind of just do to contribute to our local community, like a brainstorming site or something like that.
Yeah.
And then we'll, with the awesomeness of the features module, kind of use that on other sites that we develop to try to help slim down the cost.
Yeah.
A little bit, so just put that out there.
And are you guys doing distributions? I mean, have you created a distribution that you could like share between different groups that have similar needs?
Not yet, actually. I'm actually the first Drupal developer at this spot. They've been building with like Perl and whatnot, so it's something new that we're kind of experimenting with.
Okay, cool.
But that's definitely a future goal.
Yeah, I think that's there's some buzz around doing something like that too, where we could what's the lowest hanging fruit that we could do. So great. Well, thank you everyone. Thanks for coming, and happy to share more. So.